Just like your son was saying, it's socially acceptable, and the more socially acceptable and readily they can get it, the more problems we're gonna have with this generation. The more people I see in treatment, let me just say, I'll never be without a job, which is a sad, sad day for our state. You know, they just can't stop, they won't stop, and the average age of my clients 10 years ago was 40, when we had crack and alcoholics. Now, it's opiates and marijuana, and the average age of my clients is 22. I hope that you will take into consideration these things. I'm on the front lines. I see it every day. I'm working with your children, your neighbors' children, and your grandchildren. You know,
Money, members, any questions? Representative Sherrill, you're recognized.
Thank you, Chairman. I used to be a police officer for 10.5 years, and I know exactly what you two are speaking to us today about. And I know that I've seen some folks in my time that's went through exactly what you're saying. And I appreciate your testimony. Dr. Kumar is telling us to try to protect our young folks and our people in the state of Tennessee, and I appreciate him, and I appreciate today what you two have come and testified today to try to help our folks in the state of Tennessee. Marijuana and other drugs has hurt a lot of people. They may be a purpose for it, and I believe what Dr. Kumar is trying to do is the best for us in the state of Tennessee. Thank you.
Thank you, Representative. Representative Terry, you're recognized.
Thank you, Chairman. Appreciate you guys coming and speaking on this issue, and I do agree with a lot of what you say as far as recreational use and the effects on our youth, and brain development is up to about age 25, and it can blunt that. But I think a lot of times what we end up doing is we end up conflating two issues: the issue of recreational versus actual medical use of a medication or a drug. And if done the right way and under the right circumstances, I think that marijuana or the cannabinoids can be of medical value to our state and to our patients. And you mentioned that you had gone on to harder things like cocaine. I'm going to say something probably a lot of people in this room may not know. You know, cocaine is harder on you than marijuana. I think you would agree with that. But cocaine is actually a Schedule II drug and legal in Tennessee. It's legal in all the states, and it has medical use. And when you don't conflate the two issues and you take the recreation out of that, cocaine is used. I can go up to my hospital. I can probably they have it at Vanderbilt. They have it at St. Thomas here downtown. It's in a liquid form, and you use it for ear, nose, and throat surgery. They pack the nose with it to numb up the nose. It decreases bleeding because it's got some vasoconstrictive properties. As an anesthesiologist, when we do an awake fiber optic intubation, we numb up the nose. We can use it that way as well. So when done the right way, and you don't conflate the two issues, and you strictly talk about medical, it can be a benefit, and that's what I think we need to separate here. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else? Representative Butt, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and I want to thank both of you for coming here today, because we all do understand how important this is. This statement of intent, I don't think solves what you have talked about today, really. We have to find a way to solve some of this. I totally agree with that. And when we place people in jobs, a lot of them can't stay after the first random drug test. And we understand that. I know the seriousness of this. But I'm questioning today whether we're talking about the use of recreational marijuana, whether we're talking about the use of the medical uses. And I think things that we're talking about, there may need to be legislation put in place. But I don't feel like this statement of intent helps our problem in that respect. But you don't know how much we appreciate you coming today. Thank you.
Thank you, Representative. Anyone else? Seeing none, we thank you all for coming today. And addiction, the family's battle with addiction to help a loved one, no matter what the addiction is to. So we appreciate y'all coming today. Thank y'all very much. Thank you. We have Department of Health. Is that right?
Right. Dr. Warren from the Department of Mental Health. And I don't think TBI is here today. But
Right. Okay. you all are free to go. Thank you all very much. Department of Health members, as you come up, please just state your name for the record, and I guess there's comments to be made. Representative Kumar.
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, I just want to take a moment to thank these two residents from my community who came here, laid their heart and their lives open, and we are really
Commissioner for the Department of Health and the pediatrician. We are in support of the spirit of this joint resolution by Representative Kumar, recognizing that there is an established process through the FDA by which medications are deemed safe and effective, and that's based on solid science. I think that in general, as we think about this topic, we think that there are individual benefits in some cases, and there are studies to back that up, but that in many cases those have been overstated. And the National Academies of Medicine report that was released earlier this year goes into great detail about that. Along with that, we think there are population harms that have been understated, particularly as we think about vulnerable populations like children. So going with this process that is already established to establish safety and efficacy is something that we would endorse. One thought we do have, our understanding of the way that the amendment language is written, it says these dosages are to be utilized. The FDA language talks about dosage forms, which specifies whether it's a tablet or a capsule. That's our understanding of what the intent is, and so we're in support in that way.
Thank you for your testimony. I have a question real quick. It was mentioned earlier that cocaine's a Schedule 2, I believe, and that marijuana is a Schedule 1. Who made the decision to move cocaine to a Schedule 2?
Chairman Sexton, I can't answer that because that's a federal
So it's
decision,
probably
not so
FDA?
FDA or DEA,
Right.
one or the other.
Okay, thank you. Representative Jernigan, you're recognized.
Thank you. Appreciate you being here today. Do you think marijuana is addictive?
I think the science would suggest yes, that marijuana
Physically
is
addictive.
I think marijuana is addictive. Yes.
You think it's physically addictive?
I
Not
think-
psychomatic, but physically. I quit tomorrow.
Physically, yes. If we think about the underlying science of what drives addiction in our brain, yes.
Well, how much science is out there if it's a Schedule 1 and the FDA can't do science on it? Where are you getting your information?
So I'm happy to share that with you. I think one of the challenges that we have in this debate is because of some of the scheduling around research restrictions. I mean, the science comes from where folks have used this in non-medical settings in many cases, or where there is anecdotal report. The challenge, though, becomes when we think about clinical trials as we typically think about them that are sponsored by pharmaceutical companies or by researchers. That is limited because of the scheduling restrictions that are currently in place.
Is there a medical purpose for it?
I think there is some science that says in very specific conditions, and we've got this National Academies of Medicine report that specifically gives 3 conclusions. So they talk about multiple sclerosis and spasticity that's associated with that. They talk about nausea and vomiting, particularly associated with people who are on chemotherapy, and they talk about chronic neuropathic pain. They looked at a whole range of conditions in that report, but didn't find significant evidence in support of those conditions.
Do you equate, like Dr. Kumar here says, opioids with marijuana?
So I don't know that I understand your question.
He equated the two back in 1986, I believe, give the parallels. Do you believe marijuana and opioids are the same?
I see what you're saying, Representative Jernigan. I think the point, as I understood that Representative Kumar was trying to make, was when that discussion was going on and the conversation was around the body of evidence that lived around that body of evidence was actually pretty small. If you look at the study that is often cited for the rates of addiction of opioids, and there was this number that many of us learned in training as opioids were less than 1% addictive or addictive in less than 1% of the population. That wasn't actually based on a study. It was based on about a paragraph and a half of a letter that was in an academic journal. And so I think to that point, to what I understood Representative Kumar was saying, there's still large gaps. There is some literature about this, but we certainly need to know more, and going through that FDA approval process recognizes the importance of that literature and takes that into account.
Well, let's put it this way. I'm losing 3 people a day in Tennessee for opioid use. How many are overdosing on marijuana a day?
I don't have statistics on marijuana overdose. What I can tell you is that marijuana is the most frequently found illicit drug in people who are involved in motor vehicle accidents, and there is the claim that marijuana can be substituted and is the solution to our opioid crisis, and the science absolutely does not support that.
You have a study, you said?
There are 2 studies, and I'll tell you the 2 that are often cited. One looks at prescription of opioids in states where medical marijuana laws are in place. And what you see in those states is that that's a population level study. So if we wanted to make the case that individuals who are prescribed medical marijuana use less opioids, we would need a patient level study. So I can say patient A got marijuana, patient A took less opioids or came off of their opioids. That's not what that study shows. That study shows in this particular state or these states, the amount of opioid prescribing went down when medical marijuana was in place. But those are not apples to apples.
And who sponsors this study?
I don't know, but I'd be happy to find out and share
That would be
that study
good to
with you.
know before you start citing studies, who sponsors the studies and who pays for them.
I'd be happy to share that with you.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Chairman.
I have a question. In the state of Tennessee, are people, it was referenced earlier that people in the state of Tennessee are seeking treatment for an addiction to marijuana. Is that an accurate statement in your opinion?
Yes.
And then in those studies that you cited, where a lot of times we have heard that in states that have passed marijuana, they have seen opioid usage decrease. Is it possible too that, like the state of Tennessee has been in the last few years, taking on legislation, looking at the opioid problem and crafting solutions that tighten it, it just could have potentially been coinciding with the date of approving marijuana. So in that population study, it may look like it had an effect, but there could be secondary factors there as well.
Absolutely, Chairman, and I think that's the challenge with those kinds of studies. The answer could, in fact, be that marijuana use is associated with decreased opioid use, or, and who knows the way these studies are done, it could be that maybe they put in a prescription drug monitoring program like our controlled substance monitoring database. Maybe they up treatment resources for people with substance use disorders related to opioids. But at the level that this study was done, you're just looking at broad changes in the population, and you're not diving down to look at patient level changes.
Right, kind of like Tennessee's opioid milligrams being less.
Correct.
Than it was 4 years ago.
Correct.
Thank you. Representative Hill, you recognize.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Based on the studies and the research you've looked at and the testimony you've given here today, I want to make sure that I clearly understand what you're saying. Are you saying that folks that are addicted to prescription drugs, to opioids, when they use marijuana recreationally, that they are just exchanging one addiction for another? Is that what you're saying?
What I'm saying, Representative Hill, is that the notion has been shared at times in this conversation that using marijuana as medicine can be the solution to our opioid epidemic, and I'm saying the science currently doesn't support that. I couldn't speak to what an individual is doing in a given case.
And when you say the science does not support that, you're referring to those 2 studies.
Correct, and I'd be happy to provide those.
In the world of science, is 2 studies enough to make such a definitive statement that you just made?
What we've got at this point is that it's the best we've got. I think the reality is we need additional studies to better understand the breadth of the situation, but it's also not enough to assume that the answer is in the other direction.
But wait a minute, can we have it both ways? It sounds like we're trying to have it both ways, which is we only have 2 studies, so we can't say that it's going to fix the opioid issue, but then we only have 2 studies, and now we can say that we can't say. How many? Let me ask it another way. How many studies do you need before you feel confident in your position at the Department of Health to make a definitive statement one way or the other?
So I think it depends on the type of study. So if you're talking about typically when you're going to have a new drug, for example, and I'll say we're not in the business of approving drugs. That's on the federal level, but typically the gold standard would be something like a randomized controlled trial where you're double-blinded and placebo. Many of the studies that we have on this topic are not of that caliber, so they're observational studies. They rely on patient recall, and so the quality of those studies is not very good. So I think it's difficult to put an exact number on how many studies you would need.
One last question, Mr. Chairman. In the resolution, it states that there are approved prescription medications that have marijuana as their basis. And you stated that you are, as the department, okay with that, obviously because it's prescribed by physicians in this state. Does that mean that the Department of Health is in favor of the medicinal use of marijuana?
I think that our stance is for these medications that have gone through the FDA approval process, they've gone through a process by which we have learned that what a provider is prescribing, first of all, they know what their patient is getting in the form that they're getting. They know the strength that they're getting, and there are some guidelines that they know around which they can prescribe. The dosage, the frequency, the dosage at which we would expect to see adverse effects. And so for medications that have gone through that process, that have indications for treatment, that have specified dosages and frequency, and have gone through that FDA process, then yes, we are supportive of that as outlined in this resolution.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Representative Jones, you're recognized.
In all of the years that I have been a co-sponsor and sponsor of medical marijuana, the Department of Health has been there saying, let's see how we can work this out. Let's see what we can do. Let's see how it goes. And over the past few years, they've gone to 2 studies, makes it to where we just can't approve of this. This is not something that we can be for. Can you tell me, sir, treatment, people that are seeking treatment for marijuana, you say addiction, which I've read 1,000 studies that say that's impossible, but what's the percentage of people who are seeking treatment for marijuana versus, let's say, opioids? And when you tell me that, if you please tell me where you get those statistics.
Sure. Representative Jones, I don't have the answer to that, but I'm happy to try to find that and would certainly have to get back to you. I also want to clarify the position that we have generally on this is not based on 2 studies. The 2 studies that we've been talking about here are specifically on the replacement of marijuana for opioids and billing opioids or marijuana as a solution to opioids. There's a body of evidence, and I think we've got the National Academies of Medicine report that looked at a number of studies and would be happy to share that. So it would not be accurate for us to say that our position is based on those 2 studies.
Well, I can tell you that I have lots of national studies that are just the opposite of what you're saying, totally opposite. Can you tell me how many people are seeking treatment for alcohol addiction as opposed to marijuana?
I can't tell you that number, but I'd be happy to confer with our colleagues at Mental Health and get back with you on that.
See, I'm unfortunately, and I'm sorry to say this, but I think you're coming here and you're telling people things that you really don't have backup info on because he's not been able to cite anything, Representative. He's not been able to cite anything. And so I think that if you're going to make those statements to this committee, you ought to be able to back those up with where you find that information.
I have one question for you. Is it illegal for a Schedule I to be used in the United States of America?
That is my understanding. Yes,
Is
sir.
marijuana currently a Schedule I?
Yes.
Is that fact?
That is my understanding of fact, yes.
Thank you. Any further questions? Seeing none, thank you for your testimony. Representative Faison, I believe you might have someone you'd like to testify.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and we do have a U.S. veteran in here today, and I just wanted, this is Matt. Matt, would you step up here? And what you've heard in the last few minutes, and I'd like to address it when we go back into session, but you've heard the sky's falling and all these horrible things are taking place, but I would like to assure the people the sky's not falling. I'd want you to just hear from a perspective from a young man who's been given all type of opiates and barbiturates, and actually how that's really one of the major problems in his life and how he could potentially find freedom another way. This is Matt, yes.
First of all, please let me begin by saying I'm honored to sit before you. Also, I'd like to start out with saying I'm vehemently against recreational use, as most medicinal patients are. Aside from that, I use no drugs other than medicinal marijuana, just for the simple sake that I want to go to sleep at night. The medication that the VA prescribes currently has failed so miserably with myself and members of my unit that 7 of the men I served with are no longer here with us today. Various names: suicide, got drunk, did something stupid. My squad leader shot himself in the face after a standoff with the SWAT team. These are changes that occurred within these men after they began taking the prescription medications that are being handed out like Skittles at the VA centers. What I began using medicinal marijuana for is because I would stay up for 3 days, no sleep. Just natural, no energy drinks, no artificial amphetamines, nothing. Just the deployment itself messed up my circadian rhythm and sleep cycles to the point where I could not force myself to sleep. The VA began prescribing me Xanax, Trazodone, Ambien, and substituting for other medications when those did not work. The way I use medicinal marijuana is I ate it. I baked it into the edibles, as you've seen, standard dosage of 10 milligrams. It's not that hard to measure out. It's, and I would consume it roughly 1 hour before bedtime. Would go to sleep, 6 hours, wake up 5 o'clock in the morning, ready to handle business. No side effects, like where Ambien, I would wake up and on the way driving to work, I could literally watch the lines on the pavement raise themselves off of the pavement while I'm driving. If any of you have never had that experience, I promise you it is not fun while you're driving down the road at 70 and see the lines start moving. And these are effects that I was using this medication exactly as prescribed. One 10 milligram pill at night so I could go to sleep. And now, yet again, I would like to hit on the point that I do not use any other drugs except for those that were prescribed to me for that period of time. I'm not tweaking out. I haven't used currently in 2.5 weeks, as I am back within Tennessee state limits and can't in this state. So you watching me after 2.5 weeks, pretty much no sleep. I was speaking with Representative Faison earlier about how I'm 3 hours in a couple days right now. And in the battle against PTSD, it really starts with a good night's rest. Think about it. I'm sure all of you can relate. How would you come in here and do your jobs if you had 2 hours of sleep out of the past 72? You couldn't. And the only available treatments that were given to me failed me miserably. Not only failed myself, but my fellow comrades. We served with the 278th ACR. We deployed to protect Tennessee itself. And it's to see the methods and procedures that are in place fail so miserably, and to see so much false information being spread around about the natural flower, very similar to melatonin as far as the effects. It put me to sleep, only it was stronger. To see so much misinformation spread around, it really, I can't tell you. Just when you sit here and look at all the men that you think that it could have helped, between the various cancers that are coming back, PTSD, the suicides, there is a figure floating around of 22 a day. how many of those had been prescribed the same medications that drove my comrades over the edge? And since there is so much information being spread around, I would like to hear your questions. Honestly, I'm here for you. Whatever you want to ask, I'll tell you. From experience, I don't have studies, but I do have real world experience.
For the record, can you state your name? I don't think we got your full name.
My name is Matthew Joseph Walzerk.
And are you here representing someone? There's a sticker. Are you here representing yourself?
I was actually invited up here with Safe Access Tennessee.
All right, very well. Representative Butt, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and let us say thank you for your service. We appreciate that tremendously, and we honor you for that. I would like to know, how long have you been using 10 milligrams?
I started when I was 22, ma'am, and I am currently 26.
Okay, so for 4 years you have kept the same dosage.
Yes, ma'am.
You haven't felt the need to increase the dosage.
Oh.
It's working. That's one of the things we hear a lot. That once you start, then you're going to have to increase your dosage.
Yes, ma'am. Like I was saying, what I did is every 2 weeks I would make 1 tray of brownies. And having friends who are much better at math and chemistry than I am, worked out the math to say, hey, you would need this much of the raw material to go into these to get 10 milligrams per slice of brownie. And I would eat 1 slice of brownie at night, roughly 2 hours before bedtime. After the first hour, I started feeling groggy. By the second hour, I was out. And like I was saying before, 6 hours of sleep, and I was up ready the next morning, ready to go.
Okay, we appreciate your testimony today. Thank you.
Well, thank you, ma'am.
Representative Staples, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Sir, thank you so much for your service. And you have the most organic testimony that I've heard. I appreciate that. I just want to ask you a couple of questions,
Please.
so you can educate me.
Please.
Prior to your medical use of marijuana, did you ever use it recreationally?
I tried it once when I was 18 on the beach in Florida.
That's fine. I tried it when I was 16. It made me sleepy. I stopped using it.
As I was saying before, I'm not big on the effects. I'm not one of those that seeks a high. It is that the fact that you can't go through life sober makes trying to overcome the obstacles placed in your path 10 times more difficult.
Amen. Listen, couple of questions. Would you be opposed to the idea of working with your personal physician, your private physician, your doctor, with trying to figure out where you are and working out the effects on it? I mean, what are your thoughts on that?
In terms of dosages, sir?
Yes, dosages. I'm on high blood pressure medication. I go to the doctor and argue with him about everything, just how it affects me, and I work with him on it. I look at him as paying him to help me regulate some of my poor habits, okay, so I won't stroke out. But I'm just saying, that's just me, but I'm asking you.
Yes, sir. I would be completely open to that.
Okay.
As long as all the discussions between my doctor were...
And yourself?
Yes.
Okay. And my last question, sir, and thank you for tolerating me and being patient.
Ask away, sir.
Apparently, if Tennessee was to legalize medical marijuana, because you are someone who uses it for medical purposes, do you think, I'm asking you what you think as a citizen, do you think we should regulate it from growers as well as to how it's prescribed?
Well, there has to be some form of quality control. Has to be. If you look at the samples of marijuana that have been sent out from the farm in Mississippi, it looks nothing like the pharmaceutical grade cannabis you can buy from dispensaries in other states. Looks nothing like it, smells nothing like it, but somehow or another we're supposed to believe that is it. So if there's that much difference between the private market and what the state is offering us, not the state of Tennessee, but the state being the federal government, if there's that big of a difference there, what kind of differences are you going to come into when you start looking at, hey, this person's growing this person's growing that, they're both meant to stop Alzheimer's. Just, I'm not quoting any studies on that, I'm using this as an example. But, does that answer your question, sir?
It has, sir. Thank you for being patient, answering my questions. Thank you again for serving and dealing with a lifetime of issues for you, sir, that my family and myself can remain free. Thank you.
Representative Sherrill, you're recognized.
Thank you, Chairman. Thank you, Mr. Matthew, for being here today and your service for us.
Sir,
May I ask, what state are you from?
I grew up here in Tennessee today,
So what state are you living in now?
Florida.
Florida. So is the state of Florida having any problems with this as far as accidents, traffic accidents, or other problems with what you're doing?
I have not read on that myself, sir, but I can tell you as somebody who has driven, it's just like alcohol. There's a certain point where you go past a point where you just don't need to be operating. But that point is much higher with pharmaceutical grade cannabis than it is with alcohol. And from personal experience, yet again, since I don't have scientific studies to back this, when I would use medicinal cannabis, I wouldn't want to go anywhere. I would want to lay down in bed and go to sleep, which after everything, it's all I can ask for. I can do the rest of everything myself. I can get through the deaths, the suicides, the aspects that go with a combat deployment. I feel as an individual, I can work on those myself. I need to get a good night's rest to do it.
I understand that, and I appreciate your service again. I just don't want us to become a state that we create more of a problem for ourselves than we have, and we have other states that's done some of these things that has created problems. And my understanding, their rate of accidents and things like this has happened that created a problem. So thank you again.
Well, thank you for your service, sir.
Thank you, Representative. I had a couple of questions. We still have more people. You talked about, I guess you self-dose?
Yes, sir.
Is that correct? Has marijuana, as they grow it, has it become stronger, weaker, or the same as it has evolved over the decades?
Well, as I've only been using regularly for 4 years and I'm only 26, I wouldn't be able to give you the answer on that.
Okay. My understanding is it has gotten more potent or stronger as it has been grown. So my question is, how confident are you that when you buy something and you measure it and you do it, that it is exactly 10 milligrams, unlike maybe a pill that goes through FDA screening and comes off an assembly line where it's tested before it ever comes to market?
That is a chance I have to take.
Okay.
What I normally would do is you can tell the difference between high-grade marijuana and pharmaceutical-grade cannabis and then the low-grade marijuana. So going from there, you stick with the pharmaceutical grade, you measure it out by weight, and then through standard chemistry formulas, break down how much THC is in that amount of weight. And it is a guesstimate, but you can get it pretty close.
I think we need more chemists. I'm not sure that's how I want them to become a chemist. But now, the other thing I have is you served in the military. Is that correct?
Yes, sir.
In the military, past or present, do they allow enlisted people to use medical marijuana for any diseases or any conditions that they have while in the military?
Not currently, but if you do fail a urinalysis, they will offer you treatment and allow you to continue serving, but it is a forced rehab for marijuana. And I have seen that happen in the employment field as well, where people are being sent to rehab for marijuana just because their employer gave them urinalysis and it said there's marijuana in their system. So to keep them employed, their employer made them go through the marijuana rehab.
Would that be because the military does not see that as a medical product? They see it more as a drug that's taking like other drugs, that they would seek people to go to treatment if they tested positive for that drug as well?
Well, sir, if you look at it just for my use, I use it for to have a sedative effect, which is counterintuitive to what the military wants you to do, which is stay awake, take the hill, win wars for our country.
Right. I'm just asking.
Yes, sir.
I mean,
Yes, sir. I'm sorry.
just
No disrespect.
asking. I mean, if So in the military, if you tested positive for heroin or ecstasy, which I think are some controlled Schedule ones, would they seek automatic treatment for those as well in the military? Or is it just marijuana that they do that for?
I've seen it happen with marijuana. I have also seen people who have failed for the substances you just mentioned be removed immediately. As I understand it, it is a case-by-case basis, and in the case of the 278 ACR, it was handled by General Max Haston, as every case was recorded in a witness statement and sent to him personally.
Okay. And then just the last question, you may not be able to answer this, but is there any other product on the market for medical purposes that a patient is allowed to determine what their dosing is, what the strength is that they need as they continue to take the drug without a physician telling them or helping them regulate the condition and how much product they need?
Only when you get into vitamins such as melatonin and things of that sort.
Thus why you call this more like melatonin, I suppose. Okay.
Yes, sir.
Thank
It
you.
is. That's yet again. This is just my personal experience. Obviously, there have been times where I consumed more than just the one brownie, just on the weekends. It has the same effect. It puts me to sleep.
Right. Would you say that people can have different effects to medication? Not everybody would be put to sleep. I mean, is it possible that people have different reactions?
Oh, of course, and also even within the different strains of pharmaceutical grade cannabis itself,
Right.
there's different effects.
Okay.
Some will put you to sleep. Some will make you stay awake. Some will make you not hurt. It's if you look at it as if you're looking at tomatoes, you've got all kinds of different tomatoes. I'm saying the cherry tomato is the one that helped me.
On that given day, but that cherry tomato could change based on acidity and so forth. Representative Holtzclaw, you're recognized.
Yes, once again, thank you for your service. Now, you stated that you were out of state for so many 4 years and used it. You're back in the state not using it?
No, back and forth, sir.
Okay,
I
so-
use outside of state and come back in state since there is no way to get it here safely.
Okay, so technically, how long do you come back in state?
To come up here.
Okay. Do you experience any withdrawals?
I don't sleep. Sir, I'm not being sarcastic or anything. That is my symptom. When I stop using, I don't sleep.
Do you feel the requirement that otherwise than just not sleeping that you gotta have it?
It's not like a cigarette. And I have smoked cigarettes in the past, so if that counts for anything.
Because I think they say THC has no chemical, addiction, so.
There is no. I have watched guys that were withdrawing from heroin, and seeing the state there and the cold sweats, everything that goes along with that situation, I can tell you, from me to you, man to man, nothing like that happens when I stop using pharmaceutical grade cannabis.
Thank you, sir.
Yes, sir.
Representative Carey, you're recognized.
Thank you, Chairman Sexton. Thank you for your service and thank you for your testimony for being here. A few things that have been discussed today as far as the cannabinoids and marijuana being Schedule 1 and cocaine being a Schedule 2. And the FDA and the feds have refused to reschedule cannabinoids for over 40 years, around 40 years. You testified that the FDA approved medications that the VA prescribed for you failed you, is that correct?
Correct.
So, on the record, would you say that as a veteran, you have been failed by the federal system, but have been helped by states that have taken action?
Yes.
Thank you. And I will say that with your with the testimony of the pediatrician that was out here, I do have issues with some of the self-dosing and some of the modalities that are out there that can be marketed or towards children. I have deep concerns about that as well. I do have some concerns about self-dosing, but I thank you for your testimony and I thank you for your service to our country.
Thank you, sir.
Any further discussion? Seeing none, thank you for your testimony today. Thank you.
Thank you for having me.
Representative Faison. About ready to be hanged. Without objection, we're going back in session. Representative
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Ladies and gentlemen of the committee and those listening, we've heard a number of different stories today. And I want to try to address some of them. As you know, you've seen me on the news, and some of my colleagues know, I've studied this plant extensively now. I've traveled, went and visited. I want to set a few things straight. I want you to understand. We've been told that the sky's falling and there's traffic accidents, and this young man from the Department of Health said that so many traffic accidents you'll see cannabis in their blood. But I want you to do your own research, and you're going to find out that there is no death from a traffic accident or something, and the sole contributing factor was cannabis. It's not there. We've been told a mountain of lies for years now that this plant is killing us. And speaking with the sponsor of this bill, he said, how about all the people who are dying in Colorado? There are people dying in Colorado, there are people dying in Tennessee. They're dying one person every 19 minutes in America is dying because of a legal prescription called an opiate. And I would encourage you to find out that you won't find one person in the last 19 months who's died using the cannabis plant. Now, earlier today we heard some testimony from some people, and they had an impassioned cry for us. And I get it. I'm not for the recreational use either. But for an 11-year-old to have access to marijuana, there was a breakdown somewhere else. 11-year-old can't drive. 11-year-old can't go to the corner and pick something up. And so what I see this resolution doing, ladies and gentlemen, is we're muddying the water between a very viable use of the medical use of this plant and the recreational use of this plant. That's why I asked Matt to come up in here and testify. I want you to ask yourself, do we want to pigeonhole ourselves in to wait on the FDA for years and years and years by passing a resolution like this, saying we're going to wait till the FDA makes their decision on what we should do? Or do we want to do that and continue to criminalize a young man like this? If one of you were a cop and you know that this is what's saving his life and helping him sleep, would you want to arrest him? Would you want to criminalize him? A guy who's given the best of his health, best of his emotions for your freedom. Also, we keep hearing about addiction, and I've sat down with addictionologists and studied this extensively. And I want you to understand there's a huge difference in addiction to alcohol, to legal prescriptions, addiction to cigarettes, addiction possibly to marijuana. And I'm going to break it down for you. Why I would contend that when you hear somebody say, this is addictive, marijuana is addictive, and let me break it down to why I believe that that's the inerrant way to say it. When it comes to substance abuse, such as alcohol, or opiates, or cigarettes, stuff is that once your body has had it for a while, your body will actually chemically need it. And once you've done it, say you did it every day, drank alcohol or took pills every day for 12 months, your body would get to where it was used to it. And if you took it away, your body goes into convulsions. If you've ever been to a neonatal Abbott syndrome ICU and Knoxville, you'll see the effects on a little baby of what their little bodies are going through when you take away that substance that they're used to. Now, the interesting thing, that happens with tobacco, alcohol, with legal prescriptions. If you did that every day for 12 months and used cannabis such as he's doing and stopped on the 366th day, you know your body's not going to go freaking out. You'll be able to get up. You might have a headache, but you'll be able to get up and function because your body never creates this have to survive like it does on legal prescriptions and alcohol. That's the biggest contention of what we have with this resolution here. We're basing something and saying, well, we're going to pigeonhole us in and wait till the FDA. Listen, the FDA might not ever do it completely. So my question is, guys, would we really want to wait 10 years? Or do we want to look at a study? Do we want 28 states are doing something with medical marijuana. 35 have done something, including this state, with the medical use of this plant. I would contend that this resolution saying we shouldn't have done what we did 3 years ago with the cannabis plant that we did already. So knowing the truth of these things and knowing that when somebody tells you there's people dying and by the way, when you see these traffic accidents, you realize there's a whole bunch of other stuff in their system. They don't find traffic accidents where the people are all dead and the only thing in their system is just cannabis. They find out they had meth, they had heroin, they had alcohol, they had opiates. So, Mr. Chairman, you know that I brought a medical marijuana bill this year. Speaker Harwell has agreed to do a task force over the summer the Speaker of the Senate has agreed to do a task force, and I'd like to make a recommendation, knowing that we don't want to pigeonhole Tennessee and waiting by passing a resolution and waiting until the FDA might do something, might not do something, because we know that states are they're taking control for their veterans and for their children, for the sick people. I would like to make a recommendation or a motion that we send this bill to my task force and allow the task force to study it too.
Second.
Jackson. One moment, please. We will, hang on, we're gonna have to, hang on for a second. Your motion was to send this resolution to a task force that has not been created.
Is a verbal been created? We have not created the task force yet. Make a motion to send to summer study, and we'll include it in the
That was
task
the
force.
proper motion, it's been second. So the motion is and seconded to send House Joint Resolution 65 as amended to summer study. If you vote yes, that would send it to summer study. If you vote no, that would keep it, that would defeat it, and we would continue debate here as we move forward. With that, Representative Reagan, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and my learned colleague here, with his good explanations and so forth notwithstanding, I think that the resolution before us, and I'm willing to have the sponsor correct me if I'm in error, is not related to marijuana. Yes, not related to marijuana, which is his task force. It is instead related to those things which the FDA has approved as derivatives and so forth from marijuana, and therefore I think his motion is out of order based on the content of the resolution.
Right, well, he withdrew the original motion for the task force. He came in with a second motion just to move it to summer study, which would be an appropriate motion. Just a summer study. Representative Kumar, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. A few statements have been made, and I think they need clarification before the vote, if it please. I think it has to be understood, and it is well known, that medical marijuana in certain states is nothing but an excuse for recreational marijuana, because so many people can find reasons to get what is known as a marijuana card. That's been proven in California and all the other states. The travel research that we do when we look at it, I think that should not include visiting growing facilities or pot shops. It should certainly include visiting drug recovery courts. Call the sessions judge in your community and find out, what is the effect of marijuana about addiction and gateway effect and other things that we see. This assertion that there is not a death because of motor vehicle accident from marijuana alone, it's not true. TBI testified before the opioid task force that 70% of number of motor vehicle related accidents in Colorado have gone from 10 to 21% marijuana related. Now, 70% of the time there were mixtures, but no, I think 40% of the time marijuana was the sole drug in those accidents. 40% of the time marijuana was the sole drug, and the incidence of accidents has increased from 10 to 21% fatal accidents. I think these things have to be considered about the effect of it. Now, it is not the FDA we are waiting for. This has basically been advances in industry, where just as the growers are chasing money out of this pot, we are going to supply people with an alternative. Similarly, industry is coming in, and it is the industry that has created medications, again, that have gone through the rigorous process of FDA approval, safety, and efficacy, and that are available as Schedule III drugs. And I like to mention that cannabinoids are not Schedule I drugs.